Good morning. It is a beautiful morning for a Car Thoughts episode. One of the questions that I get the most often related to in the classroom, things that we try to solve, problems that we try to solve with our students, is this. How do I get my students to sing louder? Especially with the masks this last year, I just can't hear them. It's like I can't even tell who's singing because they make such little noise, right? Well, there's a few ways that I would answer this question, and the first one won't be very satisfying. That is that this is not the type of answer you're going to get by going on a Facebook group and typing this question, okay? Because it's not the type of solution. If you're having trouble with that on a regular basis, let's say you're a new teacher and or you've just been struggling with this for years and your kids just never quite make as much sound as you want them to make, you're not going to get an answer to that from a text box within a Facebook chat. You might find, of course, links to resources, to textbooks on The Voice, to all kinds of things like that, but it's not going to be a quick answer, and that's the unsatisfying part to this statement, which is that this is not a quick fix. As Eve Ely said, if you haven't soaked up his wisdom in episode 50, you've got to do that. This particular little nugget, though, didn't happen in that episode, but one of the things he used to say to us a lot was, every student wants to do well, and if they're not doing well, it's because they don't know how. And so if your issue is chronic breathy singing, chronic tiny, tiny noises, okay, then that's probably your fault. And this is where it gets, touchy, because you can't have this conversation directly with a person on a Facebook group. But there is, if students are not singing loud enough, that means they haven't been taught how to do it. Because one of the things that is the most exciting for young singers is their own resonance. Okay, they love it. They absolutely love making those big, overtone-rich, ringing chords that vibrate the room. Okay. And kids can do it. They absolutely can. They have the mechanism. By the time, especially their voices have changed-ish into high school, they can really make some pretty remarkable sounds with their bodies. We're talking about processes, though, that start with elementary school and they'd go into middle school, and by the time they're in high school, they really can do that. So let's talk about that for just a little bit. Of what are some of the missing pieces, possibly, if your singers are consistently making almost no noise? Okay. I'm going to start with misconceptions. A lot of times what we think it is we think they're not taking a deep enough breath. That's actually almost never the case. There's not much total air volume in your lungs when you take a breath in, so taking a bigger breath isn't going to solve the problem. And it's also not, the other aspect of it is a misconception oftentimes, that it's just how they plan for releasing the air over the course of the phrase. They ran out of breath too soon or whatever. What we're missing when we have those two breath-focused conversations with kids is that we're missing the most critical moment in the singing process, which is the onset. It's the coordination of the onset. If they can make it, so this is the way I explain it to kids, if you can make it so that the moment at which your brain says, sing this pitch now, and the moment when the air starts to flow intentionally, if you can make those the exact same moment with no disconnect at all, then your vocal folds will touch completely when you start the sound. When you start the sound, that very first moment that the sound starts should be coordinated. If it's not, then the vocal folds won't touch together properly. Okay, so the first thing that I would avoid doing, if just for my advice here, if your students are consistently not singing loud enough, please, 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 please don't tell them or ask them to sing louder. That's not going to help. That's not going to help, because if they're making a breathy sound and they don't know how to coordinate the onset, they don't know how to approximate the vocal folds when they start the sound, then in their minds, sing louder will simply feel like push harder with my stomach muscles, push harder with my throat, blow more air. They'll just start to think blow more air. The problem is then you get into the Bernoulli effect and how that flow of air and the right level of air pressure for the shape of the tube and all of those types of things come in. And if they haven't calibrated that correctly yet, then blowing more air will just push their folds apart. They won't come together. So it comes back to the coordination. It's almost like I'm coaching my son's baseball team right now, and it's even though they're kid pitch, they're age 9 and they're starting to play real baseball, you still at that age have to go back to the basics and put the ball on a tee and make sure that they are swinging with a good form, right? Well, this is a similar thing. If your goal is louder here, then maybe some of the activities in your warm-ups don't need to be loud at all. They just need to be coordinated. So I do a lot of timing exercises, whether it be putting an imaginary bat in their hands and having them swing, but coordinating that with the onset of their sound. So especially with boys, sports mimicry works really, really well. It does with girls too. It just sometimes they're less, at least mine, I don't know, this could be a generalization, but are less brave making big motions with their body right away. They get there eventually. But I'll put the ball on a tee, right? And that tee is when you start your sound. And you wind back and take a swing. And the idea is that right when you would hit the ball, you're breathing in as you exhale. Ha! Ha! Right? And I have them do that with their speech voice first, because everything that we do when we sing is connected directly to the speech voice. Okay, and that's another really important aspect, is that a lot of times kids, and this has to be explained to them, a lot of times kids have to be told that no, don't switch into your singing voice all of a sudden. This is just your speaking voice, but you're controlling the pitch and the duration. That's the only difference. So if I can go, I'm going to blast out the mic here. If I can go, ha! Then I can also go, ha! They are the same physiological mechanism, right? So as we're getting those timing things down, then we imagine things like, okay, you're getting your timing down, you're breathing in and you're starting the sound cleanly, which they can picture because they're hitting the ball or sometimes shooting a basket, right? Anything that's kinesthetic and physical. And it's just their speech voice. Once they get that down, then you can start to add the pitch in. And then if it inevitably will not work right away, right? So they'll go, ha, ha, and then they'll go, ha, and that's okay. You've got them right where you want them now, because then you can ask the question, okay, so which noise was more resonant, your speech voice or the one you tried to sing just then? And they'll say, oh, my speech voice. Okay, but the goal is that they match. So did they match? No. And they'll say that they did not match. Okay, we got to try it again, right? So then we go back to the speech a few times. Speech voice. Ha, ha, ha. Okay, they're getting that timing. They're getting that feeling. Okay, now add pitch back in. Ha, ha. Eventually they start to get it to match. Okay, notice that at this point I have not talked to them about loud at all. I'm not talking to them about loud because I won't talk to them about loud until they start to coordinate the onset. And the reason for that is physiological. Until they have coordinated that breath to the sound, then louder just won't happen. And if it does, it won't happen in a healthy way. Right? We need those vocal folds to onset cleanly together so that when they add air through the tube, so to speak, then there's already a seal, right? Not a baby seal like an animal, but it's sealed together. And then as they add air, they'll be in control of their instrument. So there's a process, okay? Part of it involves you as the teacher knowing how their voice is working, right? So if there's no vocal ped in your background, it's not too late, right? You can go find out those types of informations, okay, about the what's going on inside the tube if that's the issue. If that's not the issue, in other words, and this is something I find with choir teachers a lot, they have this knowledge. In other words, you guys know that there are vocal folds and they have to touch together evenly in order to make a good sound, and all of these things have to happen. What the disconnect is sometimes is getting kids to understand that. So the big things I would remember if you're having this issue is the coordination of the onset. I call it connection to the breath. And I know that for voice teachers, there's a problematic term. Every term you use is going to be problematic to some voice teacher, my wife included. But of course, I make sure to define the terms very clearly to kids. So when I talk about connection to the breath, what I'm talking about is that brain-body connection. It's not some kind of a visceral like stomach thing when I say that term. I'm talking about connecting the moment where my brain says sing a B flat to the moment where my body engages the breath, right? I'm working on those two moments becoming one moment. Another image that I use is the pendulum of a grandfather clock, and I try to get the kids swinging so the breath on the way as the pendulum swings up, the breath is coming in, and right as the pendulum hits its center point, right in front of their bodies, that's when the sound starts. Right? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid the moments of hesitation that cause kids to sing without confidence, right? So there's that moment where their uncoordinated onset happens like this, right? And then we get that breathy sound, and notice that the uncoordination there is the issue. It's that the air started moving before their brain said sing. Okay? And then there's the opposite problem, which is that their brain says sing before they start moving air. Ah. Okay? And so both of those problems, when those happen with kids in my class, we say, oh, now watch out. That was not connected to the breath. Okay? And again, what that means to the kids, once I've explained it to them, is that they didn't time it right. They didn't take the breath in and time it to the onset. That has to happen consistently before louder becomes even a possibility in a healthy way. And so in a real nuts and bolts kind of a sense, the way I achieve this with kids in class is through the warm-up each day and into the sight reading. Okay, that's critical. That's critical. We sight read this way too. So if do sounds like this, do, then I don't even accept as part of the warm-up do. We have not even begun yet. Like that, I'll tell them flat out, guys, you got to sing. We are singing. No, that's exhaling with noise. That is not singing. Singing involves coordination from the breath to the brain and the body. Right? It's all coordinated. It has to happen all at once. Do, and then we see their bodies engage before the sound, and you can see it, especially in mask world. Right? They can see each other breathe or not. And that's important, right? Then that also gives them the psychological confidence that, yep, all of my friends are going to sing too. It's not just me, right? So these things all kind of work together. And so one of the questions I get a lot when people hear my high school age kids sing, because they do tend to sing with quite a bit of resonance, sometimes they oversing, I will fully acknowledge, and I'm okay with that at this age, right? I want them to know where the boundaries of their capacity are. So I find that it's easier to get kids to chill once they are finally making lots of noise than it is to get people to make noise who aren't used to making noise. So we start this process from the very first day of school. On the very first day of school, we are singing non-breathy, connected to that mind-body connection on that very first scale that we do at the very beginning of the school year. And then that becomes the expectation. All right? When they back off because they don't know the next note, or when they back off because they're scared, we talk about that. We say, what happened? Okay, well, I lost track of where do was, and so then what happened? Oh, well, I lost my connection to the breath because I was scared. Okay, we can't let that happen. Right? So these are just habits. And so back to my first thing, when you go on a Facebook group, to get answers to these types of questions, my contention is that you're not going to get a satisfactory answer. You might get a warm-up to do here and there. You might get a trick to try. But this is a process, and it's not a quick fix. It requires discipline from you as the teacher. Okay. It also requires that you know enough about the voice to be able to diagnose the problem. That no, your breathy 15-year-old girls they do not all have mutational chinks. Maybe 1 out of 1,000 does, but mostly it's because their onsets are not coordinated. So fix that problem first, and then you can hope to start to get bigger sounds, more resonant sounds, more confident sounds, and the secret, the ticker, is you will start to get more accurate reading. Because when the chords are approximated, then the pitch that the kids are hearing in their head, which is probably correct, is actually going to happen in practice. Okay, so a lot of wrong notes also come back to uncoordinated onsets. They hear the right note in their head, they just can't sing it because they're not coordinating their onsets. So this is just some food for thought. Short little episode. I'm at school now. I'm going to go inside and make some kids do this kind of stuff. Guys, I walked into the building as soon as I was done with that car ride, and I remembered another thing I do, which is really concrete, really easy to do, and helpful. And I stole this from my teacher, Dr. Charles Robinson, in college, and he does a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of dynamics. And it's part of an exercise that you can do as vocalization and warm up and part of the process of sight reading and all of that. You can apply this anywhere, and then you can apply it in your actual music too. And Dr. Robinson used to say that to young singers especially, that the concept of piano and forte are pretty abstract. In other words, piano related to what? Forte related to what? These are all relative, and for young singers, they need something more concrete, and I've found this to be totally true. So what I do is I define for them what the scale is. 1 is as soft as you can sing, but have your onset still coordinated. So if it's breathy, it's not a 1. I call that a 0.5, and then I won't accept a 0.5. So then we get to 1, and we can establish as a group what 1 feels like. Okay, then 10 is as loud as you can sing without it being ugly. All right, so if you are no longer in control of that sound, you're feeling tension in your neck, you're pushing, you're straining, you're yelling, that's an 11, and we want to try to keep ourselves at 1 through 10, and then you can do exercises to try to establish what all those numbers are. And so then once they've understood that, again, trying to avoid ever saying sing louder. Sing a 2. Okay, that's good. Let's find a 2. All right, can we make that a 6? And then let's say they don't get all the way to a 6 of what you want. And you just tell them, that wasn't a 6, that was more like a 4. Let's do a 6. Right, and just keep establishing a really concrete volume knob for them to do it. It's amazing how quickly that works. So what I'm going to do is I thought I'd jump in and add that as an idea, and then I'm also in the show notes for this episode going to link some YouTube videos of some of these ideas in context of an actual rehearsal, and some of my young singers, it's going to be a 10th grade group rehearsing and using some of these concepts in a rehearsal from a few years back. Hope it helps.